We're coming to you from the DraftKings.com podcasting studios. DraftKings.com, America's one-day fantasy sports site, where it's like a new season every time you play. DraftKings.com.
The right time with Bomani Jones.
I'm at the point now where I have been an adult and watched full careers, right? Like none of the child's eye toward watching sports and athletes and stuff like that. Like we're at the point now where I remember people's careers from the very beginning. Shannon, did you realize that I have been out of high school longer than it was my life up until the day I graduated?
Yikes.
Yeah, man, getting old. You'll be there soon, but getting old, right? Like, the one thing about that, though, is I have that perspective, right? I can see things up, down, everywhere else. The problem with it is now I get to see, like, tragic things. Not really tragic, not real tragedy, but, you know, just things you don't necessarily want to see. And what you don't really want to see is players who were once great, well, not be great. But I think I can live with guys who were great not being great. What you can't live with is when they out here stinking up the joint. And Shannon, I'm so old, I said I'm 34 when I'm 35.
You tried to give yourself a year.
Hey, man, I said I was 34 for a full year. I've only been 35 for like 3 weeks. It's new to me.
After you get to a certain point, you start counting backwards anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, man, 29 as long as I feel like being, just like your wife. Anyway, not your wife, Shannon. You know, the larger wife. I ain't want your wife thinking I was saying nothing bad about you because your wife ain't the one. Nah, not at all. But she can be 29 if she want to be too. Anyway, Peyton Manning. Shannon, did you watch the Ravens and the Broncos?
Yeah, unfortunately, I did see that offensive slugfest. Yes, I did.
Yeah, not a single offensive touchdown. Joe Flacco on one side, Peyton Manning on the other. No offensive touchdowns. Now, Joe Flacco caught plenty of hell for that game. But, dude, if you look at the box score for the Ravens and who Joe Flacco was throwing the ball to, man, those dudes just look like they weren't open. Like, Joe Flacco at one point was like 7 for 9 for 27 yards, and you're not going to tell me for a second that Joe Flacco ain't throwing the ball long if the option to throw the ball long is there. Like, it's just not happening. But listen to these names, Shannon. Marlon Brown, Crockett Gilmore, Kyle, you know how to say that?
Nah.
Max Williams. Those were the top 4 receivers in yards for the Ravens, Shannon. Number 5 was Steve Smith, senior, who, by the way, might want to drop the senior from his name because when you start looking old, you don't want to sound it, right?
Right.
That's who Joe Flacco was throwing the ball to. Dude, Peyton Manning looked so bad. So bad. And Dan made a good point. Dan Le Batard, I do highly questionable with him if you've never watched the show. 4 o'clock Eastern on 4:30, Eastern on ESPN. He's like, look, we've seen these games where Peyton Manning has struggled, and we saw Peyton Manning look bad at the end of last year, but he was hurt. Shannon, this is week 1.
Yeah, like usually he starts breaking down later in the season. This is week 1. He's supposed to be ready. This is supposed to be the time, right?
Like, this is as good as it's going to be for Peyton Manning, right? And it's not just that he didn't look like he was playing well. He didn't look like he was capable of playing better. Shannon, them balls were taking a long time to get there, Jack. It would look like he was tapping the button, except for he was pressing it as hard as he could.
Yeah, a lot of mallards, a lot of ducks he was throwing out there.
A lot of ducks he was throwing out there. Now, here's the thing about Peyton Manning. The question about whether or not Peyton Manning is done, I think, is an irrelevant one, right? When he came back from the neck injury, I guess that was 2012 that he comes back from the neck injury, all right? I was like, let's see how this goes. And it didn't go well the first 4 weeks, really. It was wildly erratic, and then it came together. And then, of course, you had the 2013 season, Shannon, when he put up the video game numbers, like 5,500 yards and everything else. And even last year, in spite of him not being that great or not looking that great, he put up really, really good numbers. But all the while, there was this issue. He just couldn't throw the ball hard. He couldn't get velocity on it. And so when we started asking the question as to whether or not Peyton Manning is done now, no. If you're asking the question now as to whether or not he's done, I feel like you've been missing the point of a significant portion of his career. And when I say you missed the point of a significant portion of his career, here's what I mean. Peyton Manning has never been as good in the postseason as he's been in the regular season. He is the best regular season quarterback I think that any of us have ever seen. The numbers do not lie in that case. The team success that he's had in the regular season also does not lie. He has been that damn good. But in the postseason, there aren't any sorry teams, right? Because I don't think anybody was better at feasting on the weak than Peyton Manning. If you weren't really good, Peyton Manning has something for you. But when you get farther along in the postseason, it's more and more likely that you're going against a team that has really good defensive backs. And a team with really good defensive backs, that means their defensive backs are really athletic, right? And those margins on those throws get smaller and smaller. So Peyton Manning can be out there running the same package of about 10 plays all game long and kill people during the regular season. Well, what happens when you weed out the weak? The fact that he can't really throw the ball that hard then matters. All right? It matters at that point. The issue with Manning right now is not that dissimilar from what the issue has been with him before. He just didn't have that arm. And so what he's done the last couple years in Denver that's been so amazing is that in order to make those passes work that he's been getting off, because he's been able to get the ball down the field, but the only way you can get the ball down the field with the arm strength that Peyton Manning has, he would have to make those decisions so early, right? And it was amazing that he was able to do that in the first place, because the only way he can get the ball down the field like that is if he knows what everything is going to be on a play and he can make that decision before anybody realizes where the ball is going. That way they can't react to it. That is an amazing trick to pull off, and it's a lot to ask of a dude to pull off at age 39. And that's basically what we're asking Peyton Manning to do right now at age 39. He's got to basically be able to figure out where to throw the ball before it's even snapped. Because if there's any time to react, man, they are about to be on it. On it. So it doesn't matter if he's done. He might put it together, and he might wind up having a very good regular season. It's entirely possible. I'm not discounting the possibility that he could look better than he did in this game. However, if he ever looks anything close to that, or the fact that looking like he did in that game is possible, then you can't win a Super Bowl with him. You just can't beat 3 or 4 really good teams looking like that. Like, I had questions about Tom Brady last year and whether he still had the arm strength in order for you to get through the conference, right? And clearly they figured it out, right? Clearly they got the Super Bowl. But it's a legitimate concern. It'll always be a legitimate concern. Does your quarterback have the arm to get it down the field? Like, as down as you might be on Colin Kaepernick, and understandable after last season, the reason they had to move to him from Alex Smith, no matter how few mistakes Alex Smith made, was because a quarterback with Alex Smith's arm, you're not going to be able to win big like that. Kaepernick had the arm, and they got within 4 yards of a Super Bowl. So say the Broncos are down in the playoffs by 14 points. You think this guy with this arm can get you those back in 5 minutes if you need it? Because I don't think he can. So there's no need to go doom and gloom for me right now. We can talk about Johnny Unitas and the Chargers and all that stuff. We can wait. Like, that does not have to happen at this very moment. There's no need to go to the big Peyton Manning's never going to be any good again discussion. I'm saying that even if Peyton Manning proves to be good, and last year, you look at the numbers last year, he was pretty damn good. But even if he's good, is that guy good enough in the right ways to win a Super Bowl? And my guess there is the answer is no. And if you got a quarterback that you can't win a Super Bowl with, all the hyperbole and stuff doesn't even matter. The only part that matters is you can't get it with that dude. And I think that we all saw what happened in game 1 and feel like that doesn't look like a quarterback you can win much with. You might be able to win something. Hell, they might even win the division. But you ain't going to win that big thing. Not throwing those ducks.
Bomani.
Giants and the Cowboys played last night. There's only one person on the microphone on this show who is a Giants fan. So, Shannon, we'd all like to take a moment and laugh at you right quick.
You know, it would be one thing if I didn't expect something like that to happen. But seeing as though the Cowboys are, 8-0 against the Giants in season opening games, I expected it. You knew something kooky was going to happen.
No, it can't be 8-0, though, because remember, what was it, like 2 years ago, they played the most ridiculous opening week game I can remember where it was interceptions on both sides all over the place. Des Bryant caught the ball at the end. And, yeah, who lost the game?
I think you're talking about the David Wilson fumble game. I think
the one where Des Bryant had the ball like right by the goal line. I thought they didn't get it. Oh, either way, I don't think we're getting too caught in particulars like being right and stuff. You're right though. Kooky things happen in this game. But Shannon, I have a question for you about the Giants.
Okay.
Help me out. Okay.
All right.
Remember how Tom Coughlin used to be the dude that if you were 10 minutes early to the meeting, you were on time, and if you were on time for the meeting, you were late?
I remember that, yes.
And all that discipline talk always about Tom Coughlin. But why do the Giants always seem to be doing something stupid?
It goes against everything that Tom Coughlin is, yes.
Every bit of the Tom Coughlin narrative. What they do just flies in the face of it. Eli Manning is not in a terribly dissimilar place when we talk about this. Like, Eli is either the worst good quarterback or the best bad quarterback in the league. I can never quite figure out which one it is. My man Sean King says that, and I can never figure out what the answer is to that question. However, for them to get down there and to run the ball on the first two plays, get to third down, run a pass play, which I didn't have a problem with. Try to score the touchdown, right? Try to score the touchdown. But, Shannon, then your man Eli threw the ball away and stopped the clock.
And here's what frustrates me most. The Giants had a timeout. If this situation is a either or, if it's a throwaway or you take the sack to run the clock, why don't you call a timeout and discuss this? Hey, this is what we're going to do. If the pass is there, throw it. If it's not, fall down. These are the things that you discuss. And like you said, with Tom Coughlin, you trust that his teams are supposed to be smart. With Eli Manning, you trust that he's going to make the right decision. In that case, he didn't, and it cost the Giants.
But that's the thing. The reason you don't call a timeout in that situation is because you have a 12th-year quarterback. You shouldn't have to call a timeout in that situation. But you know what Eli Manning said? Let me find this, because this is pretty funny when you think about it. He said, and I quote, "I need to do a better job understanding circumstances and situations." You're in your 12th year in the league. Now, Shannon, you said that you would assume that Eli Manning is going to make the right decision. Right. Why would you do that?
Because he's his 12th year in the league.
But that's it. But see, that's the funny thing about Eli Manning. Like, Chris Collinsworth, you remember there was a play where we thought that the Cowboys had gone to the neutral zone, and they did not. And Eli Manning made this throw. It was a horrendous throw that should have been intercepted and was not. And Chris Collinsworth said, I think Eli thought that it was a free play, and so he was just taking a shot. I'm like, what are you talking about? That looks like the kind of pass Eli Manning makes all the time.
Absolutely, yes. And there would have been a costly interception, the type of thing that Eli does all the time.
All the time. And if he was taking a shot, it was a pretty flimsy shot. How do you underthrow your shot if you're taking a shot? No. He was just out there being Eli Manning. Like, that's what that was, and that's how that game ended, with them being Eli Manning. By the way, Shannon, Eli Manning just got $65 million guaranteed. How you love that? Anybody there? Yeah, there's the Giants right there.
It would have been nice to have some of that money for a pass rush or a healthy linebacker who understands that Jason Witten's trying to score a touchdown in that situation, and you might not want to let him get past this bold white line that indicates that this is the end zone.
Oh, boy, it must have been rough for you. I thought they had the game, man. That was not a good game, by the way. That was not a good game at all. It was
that's probably why I'm not really that upset, because the Giants, to be honest, they didn't deserve the play. Deserved the win, excuse me. The Cowboys outplayed the Giants. They just had costly turnovers. The Giants scored, 17 points off of turnovers, and, of course, I think Coughlin said we create our turnovers and this, that, and the third, but the case of the matter is the point. Dallas gave them those points, and Dallas played like the better team, and they deserved the win.
Well, also, tell me this, with respect to that game. As you watch this and you see what's going on with the Giants, you see they're playing the game the way that they're playing it. They're getting toward the end. It looks like they might be able to pull off a victory. That is normally when Tony Romo makes some sort of gigantic mistake, right? Because I've always said, who's a better quarterback, Tony Romo or Eli Manning? Which of them would I rather have? Eli Manning, because Tony Romo's going to mess it up. Like, if you ever get a glimmer of chance of winning, Tony Romo's going to mess it up. That's what we've been saying for years. And to be fair, we watched him do it over and over again. They had like 3 straight seasons where Week 17 meant going to the playoffs if they won, and he played awfully in all of those games, like in every single one of them. But he's really good. He was just fatally flawed. The fatal flaw part doesn't appear to be there anymore. Like, Dallas really did figure out that a big mistake that they were making was they were asking him to do too much. That just because he was that good didn't mean you asked him to do as many things as they did. They're not asking him to do as much. He looks like a different guy in those sorts of situations. And I imagine that is fantastic if you're a Cowboys fan. But for the rest of us, that's really boring. Like, do you realize how much more fun that game would have been if it was a classic Tony Romo explosion? Like, the discussion that we would have afterward, do you realize how much more entertaining that would be? All of the slander that would be directed toward Cowboys fans right now, do you realize how much fun that would be? But no, we don't get that fun. What do we get? Tony Romo out here doing what he's supposed to do.
Who wants boring, old, reliable Tony Romo? No, we don't want that.
Right, who wants that? But what's crazy about it is, Eli Manning's got the 2 rings, right? You'll never be able to take the 2 rings from him. You can't talk about Eli Manning without bringing up those 2 damn rings. You can't have any rational discussion about Eli Manning without somebody pulling that out to Keister, right? But in a lot of ways, Eli Manning is Tony Romo. But I just said I'd rather have Eli Manning because there's a chance he might get it right. Tony Romo always seemed like it was guaranteed that he would get it wrong. But Eli Manning, how many times has he led the league in interceptions?
I know
it's
at least
more than 1.
Yeah.
All right? That's the guy that he is. And they just gave him $65 million guaranteed. Shannon.
That's my answer to that.
He's your guy, but they had to, right? Like, there was no thought that they would get somebody better, except for the fact that they're not close to winning. They're not, given that they're not close to winning, I would have thought at some point they would have made the decision, maybe we need to start looking at something else. Because they're not close. They're not. So, this is the guy you got. And it turned out to be pretty funny. And did you know, Shannon, I forgot to ask you this. Apparently, Rashad Jennings said that he was told not to score if they had the chance to score, and he was told that by Eli Manning. Eli Manning, who is the same guy who killed the clock, though he was presumably telling Rashad Jennings to get down to let the clock run.
It's his 12th year in the league, man.
This is his 12th year in the league. He couldn't figure out what he wanted to do. And then when all was said and done, he still had that look on his face.
Bomani.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, including our next guest. He has 3 Super Bowl rings. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. His name is Shannon Sharp. Shannon, what's going on?
I'm good, Bo. What's going on with you, bro?
Hey, man, I'm doing all right. I got to ask you off the top, man. Talking about your old team, the Denver Broncos, how worried were you watching Peyton Manning?
I'm not worried because he's doing something that he hasn't done in a very long time, and that's take the majority of his snaps under center. They were unable to run the football, so which put a lot of pressure on him. And the young offensive line didn't do a great job of protecting the A-gaps, which is the closest route to get to Peyton. I think those things are fixable. Bomani, I'm going to be honest, I'm not overly concerned. I knew the defense early on would have to carry the Broncos. They're loaded on that side of the football. They have an opportunity to be really, really special on that side of the football. But I do believe the offense will pick it up once the offensive line gel. They establish a little bit of the running game. Peyton will be just fine. Peyton was never Roger Clemens throwing the ball. Now, he was always Greg Maddux. So let's not pretend like all of a sudden that Peyton went from throwing 100 miles an hour to throwing 75. He was always Greg Maddux.
Yeah, but Shannon, it looked a lot closer to 55 and 60 at times on Sunday.
Bo, I'm not, people know it's the first game of the season. When they're able to run the football a little better, they don't want Peyton to have to throw the football. Think about this, Bo. When was the last time you ever heard Peyton Manning throw for 170 yards, but no touchdowns, and his team won the ball game?
That's true.
I mean, last year he had 3 games where he threw for 300 and 2 or 3 touchdowns, and they lost. So what people have become accustomed to since he's been in Denver, they've averaged over 30. They once scored 606 points in the season. at the end of the day, all those numbers, they look good on Madden. If the commissioner is not handing your owner, general manager, that trophy at the end of the year, what are we talking about?
All right, we're talking to Shannon Sharpe. And one last question on the Broncos. You talk about Peyton taking the majority of snaps under center for the first time in a long time. What do you think about his fit in that Kubiak scheme, which a lot of us think about requiring a fairly athletic quarterback to get out and run those stretch plays, and that's not Peyton Manning?
But, early on in his career, Bo, he was. If you remember, when he had Edgerrin James, that's all they ran was a stretch. But they got out of that, and then all of a sudden they were mainly just a 3-wide team. And he kind of brought that with him to Denver, and, they adopted that offense and a lot of his philosophies. But what Gary and what John wants is that they want Peyton fresh down the end. He kind of wore down last year. And if you can believe that, the guy wore down and he still threw for 4,700 yards and 39 touchdowns, and he wore down. So if they can just keep him somewhat fresh, they don't need 4,700 yards. What are we talking about, Bo? Does Manning need another MVP? No, he's got 5. Does he need to throw for another 4,000-yard season? He got 16. All that matters to him now is getting another Super Bowl. That's the only thing. He's going to have the most passing yards. He's got the most touchdowns. He's going to have the most wins by a starting quarterback. All he wants now is to complete his resume, is to say, I was the first quarterback to win 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams.
All right, we're talking to Shannon Sharpe, and I just realized that game on Sunday was kind of the Shannon Sharpe Bowl with your former teams. How important is it for the Ravens that they are now down Terrell Suggs for the rest of the year?
The thing that having been in with that organization, Bo, is that they don't make excuses, therefore they don't have to give any. Next man up. Knowing John Harbaugh, knowing Ozzie, how they put that team together, the way they look at it like this, okay, Suggs goes down. He's a starter. He was a former defensive player of the year. But you're in this locker room because we feel if one of these guys go down, you can come in. You collect a check. You've been collecting a check all these months, all these years, and you never got an opportunity to play but on special teams. Now you're gonna have to earn that check. I'm not worried about that. Joe Flacco is proven. I'm not worried about Joe Flacco struggling. Joe Flacco is a proven commodity. I know what Joe will do. The Ravens will be just fine. They're well coached. They'll obviously put this team together from top to bottom. I'm not overly concerned about the Ravens.
All right, we're talking to Shannon Sharpe. Was there any team that jumped out to you, any outcome that was surprising to you in Week 1?
What was surprising to me is how the Giants and the Seahawks were able to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And now I'm starting to hear, Bo, the coaches told the running back not to score a touchdown. Now, you're up by 6 with 1:34 to go. You get an opportunity to score a touchdown. You go they make the PAT, you're up 13 with 1:34, and the team doesn't have a timeout. And then I started to think, Bo, I'm saying, you know what? That was still, because guess what? Dallas would have come down the field and scored, and then the Giants would have scored 3 straight passes. They'd have been incomplete, stop the clock, give Romo enough time, and he still would have beat him. So I'm not how and why you would throw a pass. And we're not talking about any coach. You remember when Cleveland's coach called that timeout when he didn't have any. And we kind of gave him a pass because he was a rookie coach. Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, Greg Popovich could have never done that. Tom Coughlin is a 2-time Super Bowl winning coach. Eli Manning is a 2-time Super Bowl MVP winning quarterback. You call that play, and then your quarterback is not steady enough to understand, I'm not throwing this ball away. I'm not stopping the clock. The clock is my friend. I'm going to take a sack here. I put 90% of that on Tom Coughlin because when he heard Ben McAdoo, his offensive coordinator, signal that play in, he should automatically, absolutely not, will you not run that play. We run the football. If we don't score, we kill 40 seconds. Now, instead of having 1:34 to play with, now they got what? They're under a minute. I don't believe it. And what was Pete Carroll thinking? You cost your team a Super Bowl by trying to be the smartest guy. What's happening is everybody wants to be considered a genius now. Everybody wants to interject themselves into the game. Did you see that play call? Did you see that heady play by Pete Carroll? Why are you arm-siding why are you going to onside kick the ball when you're going to get the ball back if the team doesn't score a touchdown? So if they kick a field goal, you're going to get the ball anyway. But why give them a first down and they get an opportunity to kick the field goal? Kick the ball off and play defense.
Well, Shatter, what if I told you that it was Eli Manning who told Jennings not to score, and then it was Eli Manning who threw the ball away? Because apparently it was Eli Manning who told the guy not to score and not the sideline.
Eli should be got $2 million. If that's a coach, that's fireable. I mean, think about. I get the situation in the Super Bowl. You're up, and that gives them an opportunity to come back down the field or whatever. I get all of that. But Bo, you're up by 6 with 1:34. You scored the touchdown. You're up 13, and you're going to kick the ball off. So that means the team has to drive down the field, score, onside kick it, get it back, and score again to beat you. What sense does that make not to score?
We love having the ball to talk football with us. Shannon Sharp, my man, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Bo. Have a good one, bro.
All right, man. You too.
Bomani.
I thought I had Matt Bryant as my kicker on my fantasy team because I never remember who my kicker is. I just pick one up. It turns out I'm playing against Matt Bryant. And so suddenly the Falcons settling for these field goals just became a much realer problem than it was before. You were like, yo, they stopped getting 3s and start getting 7s. I'm like, no, keep getting 3s. Kick it from 50, baby. No, I need to cut that out right now. Start getting some touchdowns.
So wait. So that was the reason why you were feeling good about this, not the fact that your Falcons were up in the game?
I told you, I don't really rock with them like that no more, man. They ain't never breaking my heart again. It's never, look, man, after I stuck around after the NFL Man of the Year got caught soliciting a prostitute the night before the Super Bowl, a Super Bowl in which he had a ball go over his head, right? Like, I stuck around through that. I powered through. Then Vic went to jail, and I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I just can't.
Your heart can't take it, huh?
Oh, I can't do this anymore, man. Like, my favorite football player to watch, maybe of all time, is at the front of a criminal conspiracy. This could only happen to the Falcons, man. I quit. So now I just got fantasy investment in this. And that's the thing about us having to do these shows on Monday nights while these games are on. Y'all just gonna have to ride with me through some of this fantasy stuff. Like, I ordinarily wouldn't be thinking about it. But I really was like, yeah, man, Brian, 44-yard field goal. You know what time it is? And then I look down like, why am I losing? This doesn't make any sense.
Well, you know who did have good fantasy numbers? I don't mean to cut you off. Marcus Mariota.
Yes, he did have good fantasy numbers. Does anybody have Marcus Mariota as their fantasy starter? Because that would be a pretty ambitious pick, but I bet somebody will next week. No, when once they were up 42-7, Shannon, it was just, woo! Yikes.
So now, Mariota's numbers, 13 of 16, 209 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, a QBR rating of 95.7, and a quarterback rating of 158.3.
And 158.3 is perfection.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not the cold water guy, right? I will not be, because Mariota played well. That was the thing. He played well. There's nothing. You can never knock a man for making the plays that are there to be made. You can't. But good God, were there plays out there to be made. Like Lovie Smith told everybody he was going to be calling the defense, and they started running things that they hadn't run in the preseason. Kind of like with Cam Newton, Shannon, his first year with Carolina, where they didn't do any of that read option stuff or, in the preseason. And then game 1 comes out and it's like, oh, my God, I've never seen this before. Lovie just got flat-out out-coached in every single way in that game. Because, Mariota made some good passes, but 13 completions for 209 yards, and none of those passes went 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. None of them did.
He took what the defense gave him.
Right. It's not. There's nothing against Mariota. There's nothing bad you can say about him. Right. The passes were there. He made them, and they were going for touchdowns. But damn, they got a lot of help from Tampa Bay. Good gracious, they got a lot of help from Tampa Bay. And then Jameis got to face Dick LeBeau. Like, I think people have forgotten that Dick LeBeau's working on that defense over there in Tennessee, and it was a long day for Jameis. And look, it's going to be a lot of long days for Jameis this year, just so you know. And part of why it's going to be a lot of long days for Jameis, basically, Dirk Cutter, who's the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, he was the offensive coordinator in Atlanta before that. He's basically gave Jameis the same package that he gave Matt Ryan. And it's like, all right, go make all the checks. Go do all those things. Like, it's on you. Look, they're not going to be good enough to win. Like, at all. There aren't enough stars in the universe that could possibly align in such a way where Tampa Bay is going to wind up being good. So you don't need your quarterback to be out here minimizing mistakes. That's not what this is about. This is going to be a very long up and down year for Tampa Bay as they let their quarterback learn things the hard way. And they're going to have to let him learn the hard way because he does have that thing where he's so confident that he thinks he knows all this stuff because he's been so precocious for so long, and people have told him forever about how far ahead he is on reading defenses and everything else. Man, you've been reading those defenses with college players doing it. All these dudes are fast. Every single one of them. He said that in the preseason. He's like, yo, these linebackers are intercepting these passes that I used to get away with.
And you know how good you can read defense? Well, at least defensive players can read defense. It's just as good.
That's right. I mean, they're there. And if they're going to just let him do it, if they're going to just give him the offense and say, hey, let's see how this goes, I mean, I do think they probably need to run the ball a little bit more. I mean, I guess you can't run the ball so much when you're down 42-7, but they're going to need to run the ball a decent bit. But Jameis is going to take chances, and Jameis is going to make mistakes, and there are going to be turnovers this year. Like, I found Mariota's performance to be much more surprising than Winston's because there are going to be games like this with Winston, especially since that offensive line, Shannon. I mean, I don't know if you're trying to make a little extra money on the side, but I feel like you can go down there and throw some blocks.
I can at least try.
I mean, look, it look like they taking applications.
Okay, I don't know how much of this was because Tampa was down, but what do you make of Jameis with 33 pass attempts while Doug Martin only had 11 carries?
I think they had that one drive, probably the best drive I saw them have, where they just gave the ball to Martin, gave the ball to Martin, gave the ball to Martin. But then once you're down by all the points they're down for, the thing about football is you can't ever consciously be like we're working towards the future right now. Because cats are literally risking their lives to play that game. You got to at least pretend for the old heads like you're trying to win. Because can you imagine how frustrating it would be, Shannon, if you're like 31, 32 years old, they out here like, yeah, we're just going to let the rookie take his lumps. Because that's what they're going to do. But that can't be fun to hear.
No, not at all. No. If you're a player, you're there to win now, regardless of how old you are.
Right. But let me tell you, man, the margins are thin in this game because Jameis threw that pick on that screen. I think a lot of people got laughs out of that, like, ha, 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 you can't do that anymore, everything else. You know, Mariota basically threw that same pick, except it wasn't caught. Like, the margins are thin in this. Like, this is an amazing first game for Mariota, right? Let's see how the next one goes. Because this league is fairly unforgiving. Now, we saw Robert Griffin in 2012 have a game that I would argue exceeded the one that Mariota had. Because the things that Griffin was doing in that game were just incredible, right? Like, Griffin was out there like, hey, watch this. Some of those passes were going well beyond 20 yards down the field, which Mariota didn't have to do in the course of this game, right? Mariota didn't quite have that game. Let's see how this winds up going, because I bet the next team is actually going to act like they've seen some of this stuff before, where Tampa Bay looked like they never had. 888-729-3776 is the telephone number. But I tell you this for Jameis, if I'm him, I think you might want to try to give some glimmers of hope, buddy. Because if you don't give the glimmers of hope, dude, they were booing already. They booing in week 1 out there. They booing in week 1.
But I mean, if you're Tampa though, you had the first pick in the draft last year for a reason. I don't think you were just the one player away. This is not a situation where it was the Colts where the year Manning was out and they were able to bring Luck back and they already had a good team at that time. This team's going to take some work. It's going to take some time. They need better players.
Well, specifically, remember, the Colts turned over about 20 roster spots that year. Like, that wasn't the same team that went 2-14 the year before. This looks a lot like the Tampa Bay team that went 2-14. Last year. Like, very similar in terms of personnel. The Colts were basically an entirely different team. They just kept Reggie Wayne. So it felt like it was the same team. They kept Reggie Wayne and they kept Robert Mathis. They kept the players that you'd actually heard of. Okay. Right? And so it felt like it was more of the same squad, but it was not. It was a totally different outfit than the one that they had before. With Tampa, what had to be worrisome to them was you didn't hear Levante David's name at all in that game, right? That's probably the best player they have on the roster. You didn't hear his name out there. You didn't hear Gerald McCoy's name out there. Like, you just didn't hear it. You know? They weren't doing anything truly to speak of. And then the ball's coming back to the offense, and, of course, the quarterback threw a pick 6 on his first attempt. You know? So that certainly doesn't help anything. But what are you going to get out of Jameis once you're down 28-7? What are you going to get once you're down 35-7, 42-7? Like, what are you going to get? There was but so much that you could tell from that. What you could tell from Mariota at the very least is that he is good enough at this point that Tennessee will be able to design a package around the things that he does well, and they should be okay. Like, I'm not saying that they'll be great. I'm not expecting him to play another game as well as he did in this one because you're just asking for too much there. Like a QBR in the 90s and a perfect quarterback rating, no, he's not going to do that every week. And I don't think even the most optimistic person believes that he's going to do that every week. We know better than that. But it looks like at the very least that he's poised enough where they can give him some stuff to do and they can figure some things out. And so some people will argue those things are training wheels or whatever it is. I don't think you ever have to apologize for designing an offense that works for the quarterback that you have.
What a novel concept.
Yeah, you never have to apologize for that. And I'm not going to be out here on the, well, they asked Jameis to do more. Well, maybe they asked Jameis to do more, but he didn't play as well. Is it because they asked him to do more? Does it matter? No, it doesn't. Mariota played really, really well. And it looks like he's going to be in a position where they can figure out things for him to do that will allow him to play reasonably well at the very least. So you had to be encouraged if you're Tennessee. And, of course, with my luck as it relates to predictions, Mariota's going to come out here next week looking like Vinny Testaverde circa 1988.
Bomani.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
College football this weekend, Shannon, I feel like this didn't go the way like college football would prefer it to necessarily go. I feel like the two things from the weekend that people remember are Buddy from BYU punching that dude in the solar plexus. I believe you saw that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that, you know, everybody wants all that law and order, but I don't hear nobody talking about banning him from the game.
The rabbit punch, so to speak.
Yeah, man. So we got that one. And then there was Jim McElwain losing his mind. Jim McElwain berated Kelvin Taylor on the sideline. Jim McElwain's the new head coach at Florida. And Kelvin Taylor got a penalty for doing a throat slash. I'll never quite – how do we decide, Shannon, by the way, that the throat slash is just the most intolerable thing in the history of professional sports?
Somehow it became that way, and now anything that even resembles a throat slash will result in a 15-yard penalty.
Yeah, and like the penalty part, like the fact that it became specifically legislative morality is what I found to be interesting, right? And then people get charged up about it after the fact because it's a penalty. So like the general morality of the sporting public is based on the idea that it is a penalty. And somehow that's become the most egregious thing you could do on a football field. But whatever, right? There you go. That's how we do this. The penalty was stupid, obviously, because you know it's a 15-yard penalty because they specifically say that it's a 15-yard penalty. And, boy, when he got to the sideline, Jim McElwain let him have it. Now, before we got the audio, all we had was the video of it, right? The audio itself, I mean, as far as football coaches berating players go, it was light work, by and large. However, Shannon, that man looked like a fool. Like, he made a fool of himself on the sideline with that. Like, everybody will tell you you got to be aware of the fact that people are watching, right? I don't know why people think this doesn't apply to coaches. You can't be a head coach of a college football program and be out there losing your mind like that. Like, forget about any of your things that you say about, well, he was just coaching. These kids need hard coaching and da-da-da. Skip that argument for a second. Like, maybe I'll get to that road if I got time later, but skip that argument. You can behave like that when you are a coordinator or a position coach. The head coach cannot behave like that. And we can give you countless examples of guys that have demonstrated that you can't behave like that. Bo Pelini at Nebraska is a great example of that. Yeah, you can't be that guy. Like, no matter what happens or how mad it makes you, you can't be that guy. Brian Kelly, have you noticed how much work Brian Kelly has done at Notre Dame to stop being that guy? Did you see him at the end of the Virginia game, Shannon, when they were driving and it wasn't going so well? He's trying to get a timeout from the ref, and he had to put his hands up like you could hear him like counting to 20 in his head to try to calm down. Because you can't act like that when you're the dude in charge.
Because you remember with Kelly, his face used to get so red. That was the thing about him. When he used to get charged up, his face, like he was holding his breath almost.
Yeah. The man in charge has to be in control. Like, that's what it comes down to.
With this McElwain situation, you can't berate the player for not having self-control, and then the way you handle it is by not having self-control yourself. It doesn't work that way. You can't tell your players to be cognizant of the situation, and then you're not either. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's contradictory in itself.
Right, and that's the issue that you got. If you looked around at those players who were standing around him, did they look like they had a leader of men in front of them? Like, you could see their faces. That's not going to make them take you seriously. Like, I think that's the larger point that's being missed when people try to moralize on this so tough. It's not even so much about whether or not you should talk to a player like that. I'm telling you, it's a bad idea. Like, that's what it comes down to. It is a bad idea. Now, something interesting happened today on the radio, on the Dan Le Batard show on ESPN Radio, which airs from 10 to 1 Eastern on our affiliates. They had Fred Taylor on. And they talked to Fred Taylor, and what Fred Taylor said, and Fred Taylor is Kelvin Taylor's father. Yes, Fred Taylor, the running back, he is Kelvin Taylor's father. And Fred Taylor said, look, I thought he went too far. You know, I thought it was a bit excessive, but I also know what the coach is trying to do. Now, we all know what the coach is trying to do, but what you're trying to do does not absolve you of what it is that you actually do, right? Like, if you were to punch him in the face, you could say, well, he's trying to show him something, right? Like, that trying to do has limits. That's not enough, just that you were trying to get him to not do it again. It's not okay to do whatever it takes to make somebody not do something again. There have to be limits to it, right? And so Taylor said he thought it was excessive, but it was coaching, and he wasn't making it the end of the world because God knows the things that he had coaches say to him, right? But then Fred Taylor heard the audio of Jim McElwain, where Jim McElwain told his son to be a man because Fred Taylor was not really trying to look at this man that was screaming at him like a fool. And so he told him to be a effing man, I believe, and to look at him. And that's when Fred Taylor said this.
I don't think he should test his manhood. The last coach that tested my manhood, I ended up making a total opposite decision and went to the University of Florida. And that coach was Bobby Bowden. It comes with the territory in most cases, you know. But again, I thought that was a little bit extensive, a little bit much. But they'll figure it out. You know, either my son is going to fall to it, or he's going to use it as motivation, as I told him, and go out and play some real ball.
Now, Fred Taylor said something else interesting, though, in that interview, where he said that the coaches who act like McElwain acts, they tend to become mockeries. He said that the guys that act like McElwain did on the sideline, people eventually stop listening to them. That's the part that McElwain's got to take. Now, by the way, in his press conference today, Shannon, McElwain said that he was not proud of the way that he acted. He said his 94-year-old mama gave him the blues about it, but he said he was not proud of the way he acted because he still wasn't really in control in the press conference. Like, when the press conference came around, he still didn't have it together. Yo, man, you can't be that guy.
He seemed to take it real personal, and we were talking about this before the show when he was talking to Taylor. If you come over the first time and you reprimand him, yeah, okay, that's fine. But as the video shows, McElwain walks away and then comes back at him.
Right. It was when he turned around and then he made this sudden turn with like his forearm cocked. That's where it's like, yo, dude, I'm telling you right now, this isn't the way that you want to do this. Like, whether you think it's right or wrong, are you trying to keep your job? Because they'll get you fired for this. Not because they're going to run and tell the athletic director, but because they're going to stop listening to you. That's where the issue comes up. But here's what I found to be interesting. Not even interesting, more distressing, is how many people are so excited about the idea of a coach yelling at players. Like, never mind the fact that it's an adult yelling at somebody the age of the player that he's yelling at, right? Never mind the fact it's the guy that's making millions and millions of dollars yelling at the guy that's playing for a scholarship and absolutely under that man's thumb. Like, you got all the power. You have all the power already. You got to be able to find a better way than that. I can't figure out why it is that people get so excited about seeing that sort of thing. That's just coaching. These kids are entitled, and this is what there are a lot of people that figure out how to get through to their players without having to behave like that. And I am not opposed to coaches yelling at players. I'm not opposed to hearing things that you don't want to hear. Not everything has to be nice when you talk to people about it, and especially in that world. Like, I get, nobody's going to talk to me at work in ways that are appropriate for that setting. Like, I totally get that. They're not directly comparable. However, I can't be out here encouraging someone to speak to that young man in a way that I myself would not tolerate. That's my big thing. I can't do that. Like, if you would not let somebody talk to you like that, I don't see how you can be so enthusiastic about somebody else being spoken to like that, regardless of whether you work in different places or whatever it is. The bottom line is, a whole lot of y'all out there only think those dudes are there for your entertainment. Therefore, whatever it takes to make them do what they have to do to entertain you, you are willing to tolerate. You think it's okay. Hey, his job, Jim McElwain, his job depends on whether that guy does something like that. That doesn't mean that everything is cool if you legitimately respect the humanity of the people who play those games. And in college sports more than anywhere else, people struggle to respect that humanity because you don't know who those players are. They're just faceless, nameless guys. The uniforms stay the same year after year after year, and you just switch new people into it, and you don't give a damn about anything about them actually as people.
Same thing with injuries. One guy goes out, we put another one back in.
Put another one in, man. The machine keeps on going. Like, that's how it goes, and I get that. The machine just rolls, and that's the way you want to play it. That's cool. But those are human beings out there, and I will never be able, even if I understand how the game goes in some cases, I'll never be able to be out here asking those people to put up with treatment that I myself would never tolerate. And if you're the guy that would be willing to tolerate that, hey, man, good for you. But you ain't about to be spinning looking like you about to hit me. I'll tell you this, too. He wouldn't have done that to Percy Harvin. You know why he wouldn't have done that to Percy Harvin? Because he couldn't do that to Percy Harvin. And you know what that means? If he wouldn't do it to Percy Harvin because he couldn't, or he wouldn't do it if he were in the NFL because he couldn't, then the reason he's doing it in college is because he can. And once you start explaining why you can do something as because you can, then you got a problem.
Bomani.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, including our next guest. He's an editor at SB Nation. Also check his work at edsbs.com. He's the best college football writer in the business, and his name is Spencer Hall. Spencer, what's going on?
Oh, nothing much. Just watching the NFL slowly ruin Chip Kelly one play at a time.
Yeah, I was about to say, what do you think about this? The Chip Kelly that runs the ball, that throws the ball 50-something times and only runs at 16.
Mm-hmm. And the one who bypasses a 4th and 1 that he probably went for earlier in the game to try to take a 44-yard field goal on the road. Yeah, that's Chip Kelly.
Well, actually, that's the Chip Kelly from Oregon when playing against good teams, though. Like, that fun Chip Kelly goes out the window when he thinks he might lose. Yeah,
I mean, this is I got heated about it, and then I remembered him versus Auburn. So yeah, maybe I'm misremembering Chip Kelly to just flatter my own sort of golden image of him, because that 4th and 1 that's happened before.
We're talking to Spencer Hall of edsbs.com. All right, college football this weekend. Brett Bielema, he had lots of jokes about Ohio State's schedule, and then his own Arkansas team lost at home to Toledo. Is there anyone other than his wife who is not laughing at him?
No. She's probably laughing at him behind his back. Because, that's his wife. And like, after a while, you can laugh behind the back. So she's laughing, the dogs are laughing. Bielema probably laughs at himself. He's probably like, oh, yeah, that was a bad one. He really should, though. And I mean this. There's a history of kind of like large jocular men out of Arkansas who do really well in politics. And Brett Bielema, I think, could slide into that. He's not from Arkansas, but he's Arkansas compatible, because did you see what he said today about the loss? He said, there was a team last year that lost early in the schedule and went on to win big things. I may have a word or two wrong there, but he legit compared his loss to Toledo, where they scored 12 points, to Ohio State's loss to Virginia Tech last year.
Look, here's how I knew how Arkansas Bielema was. Because, I'm from Texas, and we interviewed him on Highly Questionable, and I mentioned something about being from Texas. Whole face froze. No smile, no nothing. Like, he hasn't even been there that long to hate Texas that much. Whole face froze.
Yeah, how'd you like to watch that game right now? If we could just set up Arkansas and Texas and just give everyone a big box of tissues and a bottle of bourbon and just let the weeping start, because nobody'd watch that.
No, we're talking to Spencer Hall of SBNation.com. But the SEC, this wasn't a great weekend in general for the SEC. And the last 2 years, they have not won the national championship. So, of course, SEC fan gets defensive. The rest of the country says, I think we've caught up with you. What do you think about the SEC so far?
It's bad, but it's bad in sort of a predictable way, because I think this continues a trend that a lot of people picked up on in the offseason who are sort of previewing, looking at things and saying, well, where's the conference weak? And the conference is weakest in terms of quarterback play. And if you look at the teams that people are willing to rank at this point, we're 2 weeks in, right? So everybody's going to be kind of wrong. But in terms of weaknesses as a conference, it's quarterback play. Nobody in this conference seems to be able to develop a quarterback or keep one or have an experienced one at the ready. Like if you were looking at who's actually playing the best under center, okay, or from the gun, since this is 2015 in the SEC, the guys who are probably playing best, let's see, we've got Allen for A&M, correct? We've got Chad Kelly. That Chad Kelly, the one who was booted out of Clemson, hanging 70 2 games in a row, which is a weird stat, by the way. Ole Miss has scored 70 2 games in a row, and there's very few teams who've done that. Like 2004, Texas Tech did it. Baylor in 2013 did it 4 times, by the way, going over 70 points. And Wisconsin, speaking of Bielema, did it in 2010 3 times, okay, including scoring 82 once. All of those teams, the worst any of them did was 8-4. So, I think Ole Miss fans can be sort of outside optimistic, right? Like, they can be cautiously optimistic because they're going to be able to score points. It's just a question of, what happens when they come up against real competition. So, I don't know. If you look at the best quarterback in the SEC right now are really inexperienced, and the best potential ones are still babies or still coming along.
All right, we're talking to Spencer Hall of EDSBS.com. Another big game, Big Ten, Oregon, where you spent a good bit of your week, lost to Michigan State on the road. Oregon's weird this year, though, because we're officially at the point where none of us know any of their players' names.
Yeah, which is odd. I mean, eventually that's going to happen, right? Like, you're going to have to retool. But every weekend I do the top whatever, where I don't really sort of believe in polling at all or doing your top 25. Because really, everything after a certain point is just a lie. I'm just lying to you, right? I can say with some certainty right now that Ohio State's number 1. Everyone else after that is just sort of a guesstimate. And after 8, I'm really just flattering the teams I like or trying to make someone mad. So I usually go down to 8 or 9 teams. And I included Oregon in that because I don't think you should punish a team for going on the road and losing to a good opponent, right? I thought that was the case with Michigan State last year. I was at that game. Michigan State looked great. They just lost to a better team, and that's what happened this year. Oregon could get better. The defense is the part that I'm still sort of struggling with. I know that they did a number on Connor Cook. They confused him at times. They forced him into some bad throws. But honestly, I don't know how much that has to do with the defense. Sometimes Connor Cook just uncorks one, and you go, well, that's interesting.
All right, we're talking to Spencer Hall of EDSBS.com. But with Michigan State, they are at that well-oiled machine part of the program now. They're one of those where they've got the system, they got their quarters defense, they don't really do a lot of changing depending on who the team is. They just go out there and beat the hell out of people.
They do, and that's pretty much the one thing that you say, okay, maybe they're going to stand as much of a chance against Ohio State as we think they could, right? That's the one thing that makes you go, okay, you can't really game plan for Michigan State too much because they tell you what they're going to do. It's just a matter of whether you can take the punch to the face.
Now, let me ask this question. Oklahoma and Tennessee played. This was the game. It felt like Tennessee was like, we win this one. It's a win over a ranked opponent. We're back, baby. It's to let the world know that we're back. And then they just blew the biggest lead that they've ever blown in that stadium. The last time they blew a lead that big in that stadium, Herschel Walker basically killed Bill Bates, though he did eventually come back to life. How big is that for Tennessee?
I don't know how big it is for Tennessee. I think that depends on how things go over the next couple of weeks, because at this point, and this is kind of cheating, but at this point, he and Derek Dooley, Butch Jones, that is, their current head coach, have the same record. And that's a bit unfair given the time frame. but it does make the hairs on the back of your neck raise a little bit. Now, the difference is that Derek Dooley never recruited half as well as Butch Jones did. That defensive line is going to be truly nasty next year. And everything's still kind of looking towards next year. The scary thing for Tennessee to me is that down the stretch in this game, they didn't really show an ability to finish. They really just kind of tried to run Josh Dobbs up the middle, which doesn't seem real bright, and got kind of conservative. And that killed them in the end. And it should scare people that Oklahoma figured things out. They ended up, I believe, in fourth quarter in OT scoring 28 points. And if Baker Mayfield can figure things out, if they can get into a rhythm, that's the kind of thing where, remember, they were 8-5 last year, but 3 of those games were single-digit games. If they have enough offense to make up that kind of a margin, they'll be back to a 10-11 win team again.
Well, you mentioned Derek Dooley. Let us not forget that Derek Dooley had a whole recruiting cycle where he was like, you know what? I don't need to recruit any offensive linemen. Nope, none at all.
When do those come in handy in the SEC? You won't need those.
That's still the craziest thing in the world to me. You went through a whole year without recruiting an offensive lineman. Last question for Spencer Hall of SBNation.com. Is there anybody on Notre Dame's team who's not going to be hurt for the year? Anybody?
No. They're all getting injured. Apparently, this is Brian Kelly's fate, is to build really good teams at Notre Dame and then watch them all go down with injury. And I really I don't want to feel pity for Notre Dame because up front, I will tell you my bias is up front. I don't like them. I never have. I don't care. I think Notre Dame being good for the sport of college football is one of the great lies that people tell for absolutely no reason. It doesn't matter. Look, Notre Dame's been awful for a real long time prior to Brian Kelly, and college football's ratings went through the roof. So it doesn't matter whether Notre Dame's there or not, okay? It just matters to Notre Dame fans and the sort of people who just like to glom onto large brands and winners, right? You're sort of generic Yankees Duke fans, right? You just throw the Notre Dame jersey in there, probably what all their closets look like. And that's a shame because Brian Kelly's a good coach. He's built good teams, but he keeps getting injuries at absolutely the worst possible time. And another person to feel sorry for, and this is Mike London, because before that, UVA was about to score the biggest win of his tenure. And then one pass undoes the whole thing, the entire thing, the play that could have changed their entire year. If they recover from this psychologically, I'll be really impressed and surprised because I don't think they will.
Well, we're about to have to go, but I just wanted to tell you as a University of Florida alum, congratulations on having another coach that has a difficult time maintaining his composure. Way to go.
Well, think about this. In the state of Florida, when has being a slightly psychotic, unhinged, lunatic dictator ever gone wrong?
And there you have it. Spencer Hall, EDSBS.com. Also check him out at SBNation.com. My man, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Bomani